Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Hello. Happy Friday. We are back with another live episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm your host, Namdi Oswagu, and I'm joined today by Jackson Tovar. How are you doing today? You're on mute, Jackson. Let's
Wow. Gosh, I'm doing well and excited to be here. It's 9 a.m. for me, so forgive the mute button.
Oh, that's not a problem at all. Where are you based out of?
I'm in Manhattan Beach in Los Angeles, California.
I know I see the surfboards and stuff like that. Pretty cool stuff. Listen, let me get into it. So once again, this is the Tech Behind FinTech. To our existing guests who come on the show, you know our format. We go through our introduce our guests, go through our news article of the week, and then we get into our main topic. Once again, I'm your host, Namdi Oswagu. Without further ado, let me introduce my guest, Jackson Tovar. We're going to go through his bio right now. Jackson is a partner manager at Vanta. Over the last 2 years, Jackson has been a part of the development of Vanta's MSP partnership, where he focuses on supporting MSPs, VCSO, and consultants up-level their service offerings by implementing Vanta's trust management platform. Prior to Vanta, Jackson was an account executive at the corporate travel and expense disruptor Maven, formerly Trip Actions, and the leading e-discovery platform Everlore. Jackson is an avid surfer and is based in Manhattan Beach, California. Guess we got into that prematurely, right?
Yeah, bury the lead.
Awesome. So to everyone, today's show, as you know, for the month of April, we're focusing on SOC 2 and various aspects of it. Today's show is how automation is revolutionizing the FinTech compliance landscape. So we're going to talk about different compliance frameworks, mainly SOC 2 and automation efforts behind it, and get into it, understand where we're at in the industry, where we came from, and so forth. So before we jump into our topic, we're going to go over our news article of the week. And before that, we're just going to do some housekeeping. Number one, we are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, not Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube. And on those platforms, if you do make a comment, it's going to show up on the video. We have a separate stream going from Instagram as well, because it's not integrated with our platform. So those are the housekeeping things out of the way. Please feel free to ask questions. Feel free to jump in with your comments. If you have expertise in this area and would like to add, feel free to drop a comment. We love the interaction. This is a live show. We keep it conversational. The goal is to learn, to explore, and dive into various aspects of the technology behind FinTech, and sometimes also on the business side as well. So without further ado, our first news article of the week, we're going to talk about Visa announces Visa Plus to support interoperability between payment platforms like Venmo and PayPal. So payments giants Visa has partnered with PayPal and Venmo to trial Visa Plus, a new way to send money via different P2P, person-to-person digital payment apps. PayPal and Venmo users in the U.S. will be able to set up a payment address linked to their account and send money between the two platforms later this year. So found that really interesting, just the idea of that. I know, I've used both platforms, Venmo and PayPal, and it'll be interesting. Sometimes when you have people on different platforms, you need to go on that platform to send the money. But in this Visa Plus, you can send money throughout both platforms. Jackson, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think there were speaking about this almost like 2 years ago. So it's good to finally see some advancements and developments in the space. I too am a user of Venmo and PayPal. So yeah, excited to see how it plays out.
Okay. All right. So guys, let's jump into our main topic of the week right now, which is how automation is revolutionizing the FinTech and compliance landscape. So with that said, right, let's just jump into it. So we talked about SOC 2 last week. If you are not familiar with SOC 2, it's a compliance framework by the AICPA that a lot of vendors, third-party vendors, FinTechs go for to attest their security and so forth. So it was a deep dive last week into the various aspects of it. So today, what I really want to jump into is the automation aspect behind it. I remember doing these types of compliance attestations or deep dives, for clients and places that I worked, over a decade ago, and it was extremely manual with Excel. Through the advent of API and cloud-based systems with automated. I want to get your opinion, Jackson, on where do you see the industry and just talking about all those different transitions from over a decade to where we're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's really been a major advancement in the last, few years. As you mentioned, spreadsheets probably still very much the norm amongst most companies that are doing SOC 2 or this level of compliance, but definitely the trend is moving towards automation. A lot of reasons for that. One is the complexity of IT environments as they're developing, as they're becoming more cloud-based. There is more of a need for real-time monitoring. And the tech landscape that we're in, automation is becoming more and more of a table stake benefit for most organizations. And so compliance is moving that direction as well. Also the rise of cybersecurity threats. You need that kind of proactive monitoring. So the state that we've seen for a long time is those spreadsheets, is those screenshots and uploading. But the idea is to have real-time security monitoring to make companies safe to do business with.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, you mentioned continuous monitoring, and I know when you go through the SOC 2, there's point in time, and there's also you have to monitor for X amount of months. But it seemed like the past before the automation efforts behind it, I look at both as being static, right? It might be static for a point in time, or static for, okay, I monitored from 3 months or 6 months, and that's it. With the automation aspect, the continuous monitoring, can you dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are a lot of point in time features of a lot of these compliance frameworks. You are going through an annual audit with SOC 2, but you are, testing across the year and providing evidence that you're, following and understanding those controls on a daily basis or a yearly basis, depending on your level of SOC 2. But taking it one step further, it's really, and without getting too far into Vanta, like our goal is to help secure the internet. There are these point in time things, but your infrastructure is continuously running. Your clients are continuously moving things in and out of your infrastructure, and having that kind of continuous action of running a test every hour to make sure that something is still in compliance, to be alerted when things are failing, or if there are risks in your business, is truly making a trusted company, truly making a safe company. So while a SOC 2 report outlines a lot of your processes and your procedures and citing historical evidence that you followed those, automation allows you to take that one step further and show that you are doing this consistently and you're doing this in real time. And so I think that's where a lot of the market is trending, to provide that trust over time.
You bring up like some really good points I'm going to talk about, because I've been in situations where, the goal was the SOC 2, or the goal was another industry standard. After that goal was met, right, then the people slacked off in a sense. So, we have to, until the next time you have to meet that goal. And I think that misconception is what plagued the industry prior to a lot of these automation efforts, in which, you reach the goal and you stop, where, the security process is a journey. It's an ongoing process. So, maybe the SOC 2 is your North Star, but what are you constantly doing once you reach that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's even like a deeper thought behind it, which is for a lot of organizations, getting a SOC 2 has two purposes. One is, proving that you are a compliant and safe company. The other part is a lot of the time you're getting this for commercial reasons. Your biggest client is requiring it. Your investors are requiring it, or any sort of industry that you're in, especially the fintech industry. There are legally required things that you'll need to implement. But security and compliance is definitely growing in the sales aspect as well. We're seeing a lot of obviously changes in the market, and global demand for SaaS is slowing, and there's longer deal cycles. There's more purchase oversight. But with that, there's also a higher intensity and scrutiny on risk management and vendor risk management and expectations from your clients to be in a good security and compliant posture. So SOC 2 was, a few years ago, like a competitive differentiator, or in some organizations like table stakes. But in the sale of actually selling your tools to another company, the competition is now starting to include security postures. And so SOC 2 is no longer a differentiator. A lot of times folks want, real-time analytics to know, the best security posture might be from the number 2 company on our list of vendors, but they have the best security posture, so we're going to go with that vendor.
That's an interesting point. And I mean, I've seen that too in different parts of the show. Talked about that security is now becoming a sales enabler, right? So where before it was like, okay, we have to go through this due diligence. We chose you for other features. Go through the due diligence as our process to check the box off. Where now it's looking like, okay, this company A, we may like their features better, but company B actually has a stronger security posture. So that's a good point that you brought up. That I think people are recognizing it now, where it's becoming a competitive advantage. I want to take a step back and talk more in technology now, right? So we see companies. Right now, like you mentioned, SaaS-based companies. Software as a service, those that might not be familiar with that acronym, legacy systems where you had a lot of on-prem device. So, with the compliance automation, that deals a lot with APIs, and you're connecting to cloud solutions like AWS or GCP. How does that same solution work where they're on-prem, where they're not migrated to the cloud yet, like legacy applications, and not these cloud-first providers?
Yeah, absolutely. There's obviously a lot of, in terms of you're looking to automate a lot of this process of SOC 2. And when we say automate, we mean the collection of that evidence, the automatic testing of that evidence, the understanding of failures of those controls. When a company is in more legacy systems, that becomes difficult to automate. One, because it's very difficult to integrate or test against on-prem resources in an automated fashion. But two is there is a higher amount of scoping and customization that needs to go into testing those environments, both from the internal team that is maintaining and running those systems, and the auditor that needs to conceptualize kind of a further understanding of that environment so they can adequately and properly test that system. So the advent of more cloud systems allows for automation on a deeper level. One, because you're able to make those connections and integrate like Vanta does. But two is, using kind of resources like AWS, they have a good native security posture built into that environment already. So you're kind of doubling down on your security presence.
Thanks for that. We always love comments or questions from the audience. So we have one right now. We're going to put it on the screen. Jeffrey Martin, Jeff, he's one of our he tunes in, on a weekly basis. We really appreciate his viewership. Happy Friday. I'm a huge fan of dashboards. It's a better means of reporting and compliance to management. Exporting details from the CSV or sorting is redundant, sometimes difficult for the standard user to comprehend. I know Microsoft's Power Automate and Power Apps provide some of those capabilities. Any other platforms you come across to make this process easier?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to speak to Vanta's platform, but don't want to limit it just to us. But yeah, no, I certainly understand your question. That is really a need, and that a lot of folks bring up is, when you're coming from a more legacy approach, or even kind of taking your first steps into automated compliance, you're hit with a lot of data, you're hit with a lot of information, or you're hit with no information if you're coming from the legacy side. So the way that Vanta approaches this is really of kind of continuously identifying the risk across your business and putting them into different umbrellas. So if you're focusing on purely SOC 2 versus something like ISO 27001, you'll see relevant tests that are relevant to SOC 2 versus ISO 27001. But the idea of a dashboarding is, because there's automation in the background, those tests are actually the same. And because you're collecting evidence in the same way for both of those, so we're able to highlight key issues that would apply across multiple areas. So rather than exporting evidence from a CSV and uploading it into an audit portal for a few different standards, you're actually looking at one identified risk, and then you can look at how that applies across multiple frameworks kind of in that dashboard view. So it's obviously best seen when you're speaking about dashboards, but I think the idea is, with automation, you're able to consolidate a lot of this. And so rather than managing across multiple spreadsheets, across multiple frameworks, automation allows you to connect into systems and consolidate those tests into one kind of singular line item, and then let the technology work and apply that information across those individual tests and frameworks.
No, thanks for that. And and I mean, that's a great point that you brought up. Just to let everyone know, this show is sponsored by Strategic Generation, and Strategic Generation offers SOC 2 compliance, pen testing services as well, and is also a Vanta partner. Just want to disclose that in terms of the show sponsor. But I mean, important point that you mentioned. I know one of the benefits, I know when I'm working with tools like Vanta and so forth that provides level of automation, is now, if a client is looking, okay, we need to get SOC 2, but we also need to get GDPR. And some of these, compliance, some of the questions are redundant, but, it's like a database now. We can just pull the data we need to apply to these compliance frameworks rather than having to reinvent the wheel. So, that's one of the biggest advantages. Question for you, right? Some questions, came up with some questions prior. What are some of the misconceptions, the biggest misconceptions that you see regarding compliance automation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest one is that, using a compliance automation tool, the misconception is you turn it on and you're compliant. There is still a lot of work that goes into this. What tools like Vanta or any sort of automation tools in the compliance space could do is test against those systems and tell you if you're compliant or not. It does take work. It takes effort. It takes time on the individual, on the organization, to strategically get to that compliant level and to thoughtfully think about the actions that you're taking to get to that compliant level. The automation can test for it. It can help with it. It can templatize things and help you get to that posture quickly and maintain that posture easily. But it does take human effort to properly scope this, to properly think about this, to assign these things to individuals, to think about the actions that you're taking. And so, there's definitely still a need for a tech backing as well as that human intervention to make sure you're actually conceptualizing this properly, that you're thinking about this from an organizational level, that you're understanding the risk and forecasting risks. It's not necessarily a one-stop shop. There's still some work that needs to be done.
I think, that's a great point that you brought up. I know from my experience in helping organizations go through SOC 2, it's, once you start plugging in, these tools that will connect to all of your cloud-based systems, the amount of issues, if depending on how hard in your posture was, that pops up, that you now need to interpret and then go into the systems to remediate. It's a lot. So it's not as simple as you may turn it on, but when you see these issues, how are you going to remediate them? And that sometimes will take some sort of technical understanding and also to log into these different places and go forth. So, what's your overarching plan? And to let those know, right? We talked about this last week in our episode, our kickoff episode about SOC 2 is really understanding the landscape. Only an AI CPA, an actual CPA auditor can complete the actual SOC 2 audit. Technologists and other folks can help you get ready for it, right? Connecting the systems, doing the technology stuff, helping you scope out. But at the end, an actual CPA will issue the audit. How does that work, right? Because next week we're going to have an actual CPA on who does SOC 2 audits to really dive in. But from a technology perspective, what's their view on it when looking at, these types of tools? How do they interact with those, with automation tool?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll preface with, I'm not a CPA. So, how they review their evidence is in their practice entirely. But, one of the things that we've made an effort in at Vanta is, making the platform usable for both parties. One is the, company that is looking to get that compliant, in this case, SOC 2. And two is the audit body that is looking to perform that attestation on that organization. And so both of them need to have an environment that works well for both of them to use their traditional or kind of up-level processes to reach the same end goal. And so on the audit side, Vanta has put a lot of effort into making the platform usable for auditors and actually a net benefit for them in terms of speed, of accuracy, of timing. We've have folks internally who were formerly CPA auditors, or SOC 2 auditors who were ISO internal auditors, who've kind of helped craft Vanta so that an auditor can come in and have evidence in a consolidated place, that they can view the work that organizations have done. Now, it's Vanta's goal to provide that evidence. How the auditor goes through and performs their actual SOC 2 audit is entirely up to them. But we want to make that evidence as viewable and as centralized as possible, so any auditor can come in and perform that look.
That's important to know. And one of the things that's interesting to see is, only the auditor from working with those situations, it's like the auditor has a special view, and the other parties outside the auditor can't see that. That's what I've noticed working with such tools. But it's a really interesting dynamic. You think about it, right? You have the technologist or the organization on one side, you have the auditor on another side, and they have two different views on the process. I always found that to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, and in fact, it actually, it really is the same view, just kind of positioned differently. The evidence that you're providing to an auditor is the same evidence that you have and you can view internally. Auditors look at evidence differently than the average kind of manager of a security program would look at it. And so the evidence is all still there. I think the beauty of making it streamlined for both parties is positioning it in the way or presenting it in the way that is most relevant to their kind of workflows. And so all the evidence is there. It's all very public for both parties, but the benefit in time is that we've taken the effort on both parts to really lay out your workflow and how you'd work through it.
That's good to mention. Another question: what are some of the best practices that fintech companies can adopt when implementing compliance automation technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. First, obviously, I would get an automated program like a Vanta. But one is going to be continuously testing. I know these frameworks are oftentimes an annual report that you do. But the kind of important thing here is that to make a company that's safe to do business with, you need to be thinking about these things on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or what have you. So continuously adopting or adapting your program to meet the current demands, to meet where your clients are. Also speaking with your clients. When a lot of smaller organizations come to Vanta, I'm sure the other folks in the space, they are usually coming from a commercial demand. They're biggest customer or their biggest prospect is asking and telling them that they need a specific framework. And so understanding the market, understanding what you're hearing from folks can help you direct which frameworks to work towards. But there is a lot of overlap between these. And so being in a good kind of compliant posture with good policies, with good testing, with good risk assessments can help you easily adapt one of those frameworks when needed. So kind of keeping everything in a good monitored basis and keeping up with that as you scale, because it's very easy to do at a 5-person company level. But if you're not actively monitoring that and making it part of your business practice, when you reach 200 employees or 500 employees, it's very difficult to implement that program as quickly as you probably need it to if there is a commercial demand. So making it a common practice within the organization across all levels of the organization from the very beginning.
It's like exercise, right? You want to do it daily. You want to benefit your health. One of the things that I want to talk about that I've seen, and I talk about this with some colleagues, it's like, all right, you, especially for SaaS-based companies, right? Go through the SOC 2 when you start doing it, but I almost feel like application security is ignored sometimes, right? It's like, we're focused on the SOC 2, you want to get that, but then, you're not looking at your like software composition analysis. You're not doing certain housekeeping fundamental software, application security practices that you should have enabled. Because you're just so focused on the SOC 2. That's one of the mistakes that I see that I want to highlight as a best practice. It's those fundamental things to secure your website or your mobile app should just not be ignored, because you potentially get the SOC 2. You ignore these things and you still get breached from an application security issue, right? Because you had an outdated library, like tons of companies have in the past. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think security and compliance, as we mentioned at the beginning, is more than just the reports. It's kind of an ongoing thing. And so, yes, one of the recommendations I would have would be to do regular audits and stay, up to date on current regulations. But to your point, really analyzing the compliance needs, analyzing the systems from a more GRC level, things across the organization, monitoring things like access, monitoring your applications, whether or not they're relevant for the compliance standard that you're going for. It's just good security posture. Additionally, things like privacy. There are more and more privacy frameworks that are rising in the US on a daily or I guess monthly basis. And so keeping yourself kind of up to date on those standards, yes, they're not, always formally audited, but those are very important frameworks or laws really to stay up to date with. And there's a lot of kind of organization-wide testing and monitoring that you'll need to do to maintain that level.
No, I mean, I think that's an excellent point. Like, because a lot of when I do these shows, it's not only a learning lesson for, I would say, the general audience. I take the jewels that are gained also. I think that's an excellent one that's overlooked, because keeping up with all of those different privacy regulations and so forth that come about and the laws, and then how is that impacting my organization? How does it impact my vertical? I think that's an excellent point. I like that a lot. I'm going to take that moving forward. Wanted to talk about some things that actually cannot be automated. So I have a list that I put together. We could just go through this list. And I was interested in that because was researching, we think about automation, but what are some of the things that actually can't be? Scoping, right? And you mentioned this previously, like determining the scope of the SOC 2 examination requires careful consideration of an organization's system. Your risk assessment, you talked about that too. While automated tools can help identify potential risk, a comprehensive risk assessment requires human judgment to assess the severity of risk. Testing of controls, such as physical controls and controls that require human interaction, such as approval workflows. Interpretation of the results, obviously, ongoing monitoring, you pointed that out. So wanted to just briefly, highlight that for the audience. It's not as simple as just turning a switch on and miraculously everything is you're done. It's still effort involved. This just helps streamline. And I think the major point that I love what you said is the continuous factor. So even after your SOC 2, because seen organizations get SOC 2, and the next question is, with especially more progressive, okay, what's next? It's that constant question. Okay, what's next? Okay, we know what. And in talking about security, right? They always say, right? You secure in layers, right? In depth. So it's constant different layers to be more secure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's really about that balance. I mean, if we separate SOC 2 from just security, like, yes, you need to find that balance within SOC 2 of automation and human intervention. Automation can streamline many aspects of this process, but organizations really need to find that right balance between automated and manual processes. The humans, as you mentioned, need to be in there scoping this, need to be in there making strategic decisions, reviewing, the results. I think the last point out there was actually reviewing evidence. An auditor will come in and review that evidence. But taking that one step further outside of just the scope of SOC 2, and what we've really been talking about for a lot of this conversation is what happens after. And a human and internal team will help kind of guide that next direction of what are we strategically going to focus on for our organization from a broad security standpoint? What frameworks are we going to work towards more in the future? Automation will be their support. It'll be that dashboard, or as we call it at Vanta, it'll be that trust management platform in the background, kind of identifying those risks, helping you conceptualize them, giving you that enriched data. But, humans will be there to push that direction with the software supporting in the background. So very much it's a hybrid approach, and it's all about, as I mentioned, striking that balance.
I mean, this is awesome. I absolutely love this conversation, because I think conversations like this is really important, especially when you're in this industry, because you start asking more questions, you start kind of thinking through some things, and you take these lessons and then you apply it to your practice. So I absolutely loved it. Those are all the questions that I've had. I'm sure more questions will always come up. That's how this usually works. But those are the questions that I've had. Jackson, can you tell people how to find you, and also you want to be closing with Vanta and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know this is streaming on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jackson Tovar at Vanta, or you can email me, jackson@vanta.com. It was really a pleasure to be here. We spoke a lot about Vanta throughout this conversation. We work, very closely with the strategic generation team. And so if this is something that you would like to see or dive in deeper, feel free to reach out to any one of us so we can talk you through Vanta and show you kind of what we're speaking about. Jeffrey, I'm happy to show you as many dashboards as you want to see to make sure that that question is answered. But again, the idea here is our whole goal is to help, make companies that are safe to do business with, to help secure the internet. And we're taking steps with that through automation, through kind of continuous monitoring, but also that human interaction and human intervention within Vanta. And so that's why we partnered closely with Strategic Generation to kind of best support customers through this journey, wherever it may be, wherever it may go. So happy to talk more. But again, appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, thank you very much. And to the audience, this month, we just wanted to take a time out and just really dive into SOC 2. So week 1 was the overview of SOC 2. We went through the different trust criteria and the idea behind it and the history behind it. So you can look at that week 1 show go to behindfintech.com. Week 2, which is today, we wanted to get into the compliance automation aspect, which we did with Jackson. Thank you very much. Next week, we're going to talk to an actual CPA, a SOC 2, a CPA auditor. We're going to dive into their perspective. So, definitely tune in 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next week, Friday, for that episode. Once again, this show is sponsored by Strategic Generation, offering pen testing and cybersecurity services. In the show notes, if you have questions and want to follow up for a 15-minute conversation, the Calendly link is in the show notes. You can take advantage of that. That's it for today. We really thank you for your viewership. Thank you for all those DMs behind the scenes, the different platforms that you log into, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. We really appreciate it. I think this is our 121 show. We had a big 100 episode show. So looking forward to hit our 200 mark as time goes by. Thank you very much for your time. Jackson, thank you very much today. And that concludes it. Everyone have a magnificent weekend and make it great. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.